open the summer holidays. It's the world's oldest open submission exhibition. Anyone can enter work to be considered for inclusion. I'm joined now by art critic J.J. Charlesworth for his verdict. What is your verdict?
My verdict is you should go and see it. You are confronted with many things of varying quality, selected by artists, and you very much, instead of being given something to you that's supposed to be good, you have to make your own decision.
I went along yesterday, and I personally did see some pictures on the wall that I thought were absolutely stunning. I'm going to mention Peter Ucker, which I think is a remark. And now these are the two by Ben Jonson, Grundtvig 1, and we've got one coming out of Berlin Pool. I think that's an absolutely stunning piece of work. And then Claire Douglas should be up. Here we are, Claire Douglas.
Yes.
Souvenir from the Anthropocene.
Yeah.
That last one, actually, a very witty painting.
A piece like that was really interesting. I think it caught a lot of people's eye because it had very kind of humorous, slightly bleak take on post-Brexit Britain. It's set in this fictitious world of Brummington, which is a sort of loose satire on Birmingham. I thought it was a bit mean.
I think we had maybe Black Lives Matter. We had Boris Johnson. I think our own Jacob Rees-Mogg made his way into the painting.
Yeah, so there's definitely a slant, a political slant, on the part of the artist. But even that said, I thought it was an interesting and enjoyable work, even though maybe you don't agree with the artist on what they're trying to say. And I think that actually made for an interesting moment because you're seeing that people are disagreeing, right? Both through the artwork and in front of artworks.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true, that. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, my name is Tom Harwood. I'm standing in for Camilla Tominey in the Camilla Tominey Show today. And what a show we have coming up. A reaction to a huge amount of news, not just at home, but abroad too. So as well, they say a week is a long time in politics. So can the government deliver on their electoral promises? Well, after their big success at the election, I'll be speaking to the newly elected Leader of the House of Commons, Lucy Powell. The former Deputy Assistant to President Trump, Sebastian Gorka, will also join us live from the United States with the very latest on the former president's condition. And I'll be speaking to the senior Conservative MP, David Simmons, who was elected to the executive of the powerful 1922 committee a couple of years ago. Can the Tories turn around their fortunes in opposition? And is football coming home later today? Former England footballer Carlton Palmer will be joining us for his insights, and we'll be taking predictions with the world's only asparamancer. Yes, asparagus fortune teller Jemima Packington will be here. And Eric Kaufman shares his new book, which looks at society's radical shift in values that has turbocharged the culture wars of our time. Goodness me, a huge 90 minutes of punchy politics lined up for you this morning, so don't even think about going anywhere. Well, first of all, to go through the papers this morning, I'm delighted to be joined by our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Because, Catherine, there is only one story that is dominating the second editions of all of the papers, and that is the extraordinary, almost unbelievable assassination attempt on Donald Trump.
Yes, indeed. Good morning, Tom. It is incredible, isn't it? You know, we went to bed last night oblivious. I woke up at 6 o'clock. It was the first thing I heard. And seeing the footage, it is so shocking, isn't it? Because he missed death frankly, by a few millimetres, didn't he? You could see that it obviously went through his ear. He'd bent his head just a fraction just before the bullets were fired. And watching it back, the panic, the uproar, and then him on the ground, you know, behind the podium for quite a few seconds, then his security services, when they knew that the shooter had been taken out, getting him up. But you hear him say, wait, wait. And then you see him putting his fist in the air, pumping the air with his fist. Even in that moment where he nearly died, even just a few seconds later, he had the wherewithal within him to realise how this looked and what an incredible opportunity this was for him to emerge triumphant, putting his fist in the air and all the cheering from the crowd. Now, thank goodness he is alive. But of course, one person has been tragically killed. 2 others are critically injured in hospital. So a terrible, terrible tragedy. French President Emmanuel Macron has been putting on X saying it is a tragedy for our democracies. And I think there's going to be huge questions going forward for the security services in the United States because,
well, Catherine,
yes,
we can see him sort of struggling against his security here almost in this sort of big show of defiance. Holding up his hand, he said the word fight 3 times and then holding up his hand again as he's bundled into the car. This is the sort of political instinct that can't be taught. The idea that this image was created of him standing defiantly, fist aloft, rather than... It's incredibly easy to imagine another scenario where he didn't struggle back against his security, where he didn't hold his fist up, as we're seeing on our screens now, and instead the front pages of all the second editions of our papers, the images shown on TV, are him cowering or clutching his face or a less defiant image. These are images that are going to last for the ages.
Yes, indeed, he is. Whatever you may think of him, and he's very divisive, many people love him, lots of others loathe him, but he is the ultimate showman and even narrowly escaping death. He thought to do that and that image. And, you know, I suspect, sure, it's taken the focus off Joe Biden and his mental faculties, but I suspect that this will play incredibly well for Donald Trump because, you know, he has emerged triumphant from this. So, but my goodness, it was within a couple of millimetres of a very different outcome. And I think it just does stress, you know, what a febrile environment there is in politics in the United States and here too. Politicians are public figures. They are in a lot of danger. And, you know, even with the best security you would think in the world, even Donald Trump was not kept safe.
No. Well, I think it's important to reflect on the statement that Mr. Trump has shared on his Truth social media network. He said, most importantly, I want to extend my condolences to the family of the person at the rally who was killed, and also to the family of another person that was injured badly. I was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper right part of my ear. I knew immediately that something was wrong, in that I heard a whizzing sound. Shots, and immediately felt the bullet ripping through the skin. Much bleeding took place, so I realised then what was happening. Just a part of the statement that Donald Trump released last night. And reading those words, it is extraordinary.
Absolutely extraordinary. I mean, you couldn't have come any closer to death than he did, and yet he got up and he thought, how this is going to look, how can I use this, how can I capitalise on this? But I think, yes, worth bearing in mind, there is a family that has tragically lost somebody dear to them, other people very ill in hospital, and there will be many people who were in that audience thinking they are incredibly lucky to be alive, and I would imagine massively traumatised by what happened.
Absolutely, and no doubt some huge questions of the security services as well. How was a shooter able to get this close? We'll be speaking to Sebastian Gorka, the former advisor to Donald Trump in the White House, a little bit later in the programme. But perhaps we should return to some more domestic matters here. There's a piece in the Sunday Times entitled "The Great Blame Game." Now, this is all about the Labour Party sort of trying to perhaps hype up how bad an inheritance they got ahead of the King's speech on Wednesday.
Yes, indeed. Well, we all remember, don't we, the note that Labour left for the incoming coalition government in 2010 saying there's no money left. Well, Darren Jones, the new Treasury Minister, has said things are so bad that the Conservatives can't afford the notepaper, that they couldn't even afford the notepaper to write a similar message. But yes, the incoming government's fundamental message is that Britain is broken, that things are terribly bad. Rachel Reeves has stressed, the new Chancellor, that she's inherited the worst economic legacy since the Second World War. And they're going to go to town on this because, of course, it's going to constrain massively what they are able to do. Now, we've already seen the prisons crisis erupting, with the news that prisoners are going to be released even earlier. That's only just over a week in to this new administration. So now Pat McFadden, who is Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, has instructed all cabinet ministers to set about delving into their inheritance, finding sort of unexploded bombs, potential problems, and he's asked for that information by the end of next week. And they are also on the second anniversary of Liz Truss's mini budget. They've already got that in their calendars. They're going to really make hay with that too. And of course, they're being helped, I suspect, by the fact that Liz Truss has written a piece today saying that the reason the Conservatives were defeated is basically that Rishi Sunak trashed her legacy. Now, she believes that, and I think there's a lot of people would take a rather different view, but the Conservatives, in the meantime, are basically eating themselves, fighting very publicly. One leadership candidate, potentially Kemi Badenoch, accusing another, Suella Braverman, of being close to having a public nervous breakdown. Things are pretty dreadful in the Conservative camp at the moment. Labour, of course, are riding high with a massive majority, but they have got very tough decisions coming, and they're going to be sure to try and pin as many of those as possible on the Conservatives.
Yeah, call me a cynic, but this call from Pat McFadden for people to go and find all of the worst bits possible, perhaps even exaggerate how bad things might well be. I'm looking at some of the statistics here. I mean, looking at the deficit that the country has right now, it's less than half of that the country had in 2010. Trying to say that there is less room for spending now than there was in 2010 does really seem to take the biscuit.
Well, we do have a national debt of, about 2.7 trillion. I mean, it is monumentally big, but I think worth saying, sure, they've got a very difficult economic legacy. However, the economy is beginning to turn a corner. We're out of recession. There's expected that interest rates will come down. Inflation has come down. Things are beginning to get better. And of course, this is why so many Conservatives and indeed advisors were horrified when Rishi Sunak called the election when he did, because they thought, just give it a few more months and things will start to look better. Now, things will start to look better, but the Labour government is going to be able to take the credit for that. And I would say one of those things likely to be a dramatic fall in the levels of net migration. And that will be as a direct result of decisions that Rishi Sunak made.
Now, Catherine, of course, there is another story in the Sunday Times today, and it's one you've written.
Yes. So a week ago, was my birthday, but I was actually at Heathrow Airport exactly this time a week ago, waiting for my two eldest sons to come back from a 9-week trip. But I should have been outside Downing Street on the Friday, reporting on the general election results, but I wasn't because, as you can see from that picture, my two eldest sons, in their infinite wisdom, had decided to take a hike up the highest mountain in Bali to see the sunrise in the middle of the night. They'd followed an app that said it was a 7-hour round trip. It was a trail that, in fact, had fallen out of use years ago. They were ill-equipped. They got lost. They ran out of water, though they managed to collect water. They were gone for 2 nights and 2 days. They were eventually rescued. They used their scout survival skills, their Bear Grylls, TV watching to help them. They were eventually rescued, but they are incredibly lucky to be alive. And the reason I've written about this in the Sunday Times, they've taken down the paywall for it, and also we gave our first interview to Eamon and Isabel on GB News Breakfast last week, is basically to spread the word to other families and young people who are going travelling that you are not invincible. Now, I know that the children's brains, teenage brains, don't finally sort of finish evolving until their mid-20s. But I think often young people, and sometimes boys particularly, do sort of think that they are invincible, take the attitude that it'll be fine. And, you know, sometimes people come very seriously unstuck. Now, I am incredibly lucky that my son's at home, but it could have ended very differently. So that's why...
it was an incredibly moving story, and that interview with Eamon and Isabel last week was incredibly moving as well, Catherine. It's a fascinating story, it's a tragic story, but it's also a story of hope, and what you've written is incredible. And thank you so much for talking through it with us today. Really appreciate your time this morning. Now, coming up next, I'm going to be joined by the new leader of the House of Commons, Lucy Powell. What is the government planning to say in the King's speech on Wednesday? That and a bit of football.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Question is...
should our museums stay free for everyone and anyone, or should we be charging our tourists?
So many of the artefacts are from around the world, stolen actually. I think it's almost to add insult to injury to ask people to pay to see the artefacts that were taken without their permission. One of the things that the museum set itself up for is a kind of world heritage where you can see the stuff they took from your country free of charge, because the British state's willing to do that. Is one of the reasons why we hold on to many of the artefacts from around the world instead of giving them back.
I mean, that's a noble argument, Wayman, but none of the other countries in the world that also contain artefacts from all over the world indulge in that, do they? We still have to pay to see anything that's come from the UK that might be overseas?
No, but the absolute truth is that we've stolen a lot more over many more years than anybody else, because we're a very, we had a very, very big empire, and during that time, taking things from other countries without their permission.
And I think our wonderful country, the United Kingdom, is the cradle of modern civilization, not of the ancient world, but of the modern world. You know, for centuries, we've contributed things to the world, which has spread out around the world, and the influence that we've put upon countries around the globe has been massively significant. I think it's a privilege for people to be able to come to this country and track the history of our country through our museums. I can't understand why they've ever been free. The upkeep of museums runs into hundreds of millions of pounds a year. Somebody's got to maintain them and keep them good. Somebody's got to go around the world and collect the artifacts which are in our museums. And I've always had the adage in life, if something is free, it's probably not worth having.
The People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
What
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News. With me, Tom Harwood. Now, I'm delighted to be joined by the new leader of the House of Commons, Lucy Powell, also Member of Parliament for Manchester Central. And Lucy, thank you so much for joining us here on GB News this morning. Before everything else, of course, we've got to start with the awful news out of the United States overnight. Just the most extraordinary assassination attempt and a reminder of the fragility of peace and democratic politics in the Western world.
Well, absolutely. This is a horrific, appalling attack that we've seen overnight, which we condemn wholly and fully. And thankfully, President Trump has survived this attempt on his life because the consequences otherwise are really unthinkable. And we condemn any kind of political violence like this, and our thoughts are with President Trump and in fact all the American people who will be reeling from this morning.
It is a really shocking moment that, of course, it's not the first time it's happened in the United States history that there's been an attempt on a president's life. In 1981, Ronald Reagan was shot. But closer to home, of course, in the last 8 years, 2 members of Parliament have been assassinated as well in acts of terrorism. Is this something that we should have a greater focus on?
Well, indeed, we have seen the murder of 2 of my colleagues in recent years, and both of which incredibly sad and led to a bigger and deeper conversation that we needed to have and we'll need to continue to have as a country about how we uphold our democracy and our democratic rights and our democratic institutions free from fear and intimidation, harassment, or indeed violence or murder. And this is an issue that faces us all at the moment, and we've just had an election where we have seen some incidents of intimidation and harassment. Thankfully, no more serious incidents than that. But this is an issue which has been part of the conversation in Parliament, in the government, the previous government and this new government as well. The Speaker has taken these issues incredibly seriously, and more security and attention has been given to MPs and candidates alike. But these are broader questions about how we uphold our democracy, how we absorb information, how we analyse and understand what is being shared with us perhaps sometimes online and on social media. Are they deep fakes? Is it real? Is it mis or disinformation? And having those conversations. But we've also seen the best of our democracy, haven't we, over recent weeks as well. People took to the ballot box right round the country to vote for change, and boy did they deliver that change. And we've now got a mandate to deliver for the British people, and that's what we're setting out to do. And the Prime Minister has made very clear that he wants to take a different tone to our political debate. He wants to govern for the whole country, no matter who people voted for. And he wants to restore trust in politics and trust in Parliament. And that's why we are setting out. We've already hit the ground running and got to work quickly in delivering that change that people voted for. And this week we'll be setting out our legislative programme, which will help to deliver on those promises that we gave people at the election.
You're going to be putting more than 35 bills before Parliament on Wednesday. Can you give us a flavour of what might be in those bills?
Well, look, obviously, it's for the King to announce to Parliament what our legislative programme will be. It's His Majesty's speech to give in the state opening of Parliament. But what I can tell you is that it's an incredibly ambitious, big, packed, bold and fully costed programme, which we've been working really hard on for many months now, and the civil service team and others have really helped accelerate that over the last week that we've been in government. And I think by any standards, by any measure, comparable to other incoming governments, this is a really ambitious programme, and we'll be delivering on those things that we said in the election that we would be doing, bringing more growth into the economy, tackling the housing crisis, ensuring we've got a clean energy and cheaper bills for people, better transport, getting growth in every part of the country, tackling those waiting lists in the NHS and recruiting more teachers. These are the things that we said we would be doing, and we're going to be doing those every day, and our legislative programme are going to be reflecting that.
Now, there's been a bit of a concerted effort from the Chancellor, from Pat McFadden as well, from various of your Cabinet colleagues, trying to talk up how bad the legacy of the last government was, how tough the inheritance of the new government is, saying even pretty unimaginably that it was worse than 2010. Do you really think the fiscal situation of this country today is worse than it was in 2010?
Well, look, I think it's no surprise to anybody that the diagnosis of the state of the country at the moment is a bad one. We've been talking about it. People on the streets talk to us about how the country is broken, how waiting lists are at a record high, how the economic situation is incredibly difficult. Recruitment of teachers has been hugely strained, that our prisons have been full to the point of overcapacity. These issues have been known about, and we've been talking about them well in advance of the election. But I think obviously when you come into government, you actually see the real figures. You get to see paperwork, you get to have conversations, you get to see the reality of that situation, and it has been even worse in many areas than we thought it would be, even though we already were prepared for it to be particularly bad. And that's part of what we'll have to do.
These figures are published.
Yes, we are going to bring about the changes.
These figures are published by the Office for Budget Responsibility. They're available to the public. There aren't secret figures that are sort of hiding, that are only shown to the government. I've been looking at some of these figures, and it's quite extraordinary. In 2010, the deficit was 7% of GDP. Today, it's just 1.9%. 1.9%. That's far, far lower. In 2010, we'd suffered one of the deepest recessions of any country in the G7. In 2024, we're now projected by international analysis to be the fastest growing country in the G7 this year. And when it comes to unemployment, in 2010 it was 8%. Today it's just 4.4%. Of the major economic indicators, the country is in a far better position than it was 14 years ago.
Well, look, we can trade statistics if you want, but what I'll leave you with is that living standards, so what people actually take home in their pockets and what they can afford to buy with that, living standards fell over the course of the last Parliament for the first time in our history. So that is the reality of the economy. We've had low growth, we've had falling wages, and we've had rising prices, which have left people significantly worse off. And our public services are in desperate need of reform, in desperate need of sorting out and investment. And we've got to take a long, hard look at the books around that, and that is something that the Chancellor will do. But take the situation in the prisons. Yes, we knew that the prisons were operating at sort of 99% capacity, but what we haven't understood until we're actually in government, in office, is the real consequences of that, what that means for our criminal justice system, that unless we take action, that criminals won't be able to be prosecuted, won't be able to be convicted and charged, that they would roam on the streets. We've had to take action, and the former Justice Secretary himself knew he needed to take action, but he was blocked from doing so by the Prime Minister. So, yes, we are going to have to deal with some very difficult
Lucy
issues.
Bell, I'm afraid I'm going to have to jump in here because we've reached the end of the hour, but really appreciate you coming on GB News and talking through the King's speech. Much more to come in the next hour.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
No one wants their child to be a fussy eater. But what is the secret to expanding your child's culinary horizons?
Is there a way to get kids away from the kids' menu, the fish fingers, the chips? Joining us now is the UK's top-selling author of children's cookery books, Annabelle Carmel. Good morning, Annabelle.
Thank you. So lovely to be here.
So, first of all, what's the issue with kids just having the traditional easy meals like fish fingers, chips, beans?
It really depends if they've got preservatives in them, if they're full of salt. So I like to make them myself, and it's really easy. So I make my own chicken glazed nuggets, and super easy to make using proper pieces of chicken. You can cook them in the air fryer now, which is absolutely brilliant, so you need to fry them. And I think that it's really important that children grow up loving good food, because they make their minds up by the age of 5 what they like and what they don't like, and it's quite difficult to change their minds after that. But it's good to know that fussy eating is genetic. It's not to do with your cooking.
Oh,
that's not to say that you can't do something about it. So I've written many, many books, and I have an app with 1,000 recipes on it, and a lot of how to make your own junk food, how to make your own isolis out of fresh fruit.
Yes.
How to make your own pizzas. I make the most amazing homemade pizza. I actually brought you some cookies here.
So these are your books here. So my first cookbook, that's for how old children?
That's from the age of 1.
OK, and you've got a weaning one at the end, the baby one?
Yes, that's my very first book. I lost my first child. It was really sad. She died at the age of 3 months. And my second child was the world's worst eater. And I wrote that book as my legacy to Natasha, never thinking that it would start a whole career.
Oh, bless you.
It sold millions of copies, and it's so popular.
Is it quite pivotal and important that you introduce kids to the weaning stage, or, how important
It's very important, because the processed weaning food in pouches or jars, it's heated, so a lot of the vitamins aren't there anymore, so making your own is so easy and much cheaper.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show with me, Tom Harwood. It's 10 o'clock. So much more to come in the next hour. In just a minute, I'll be speaking to the former Deputy Assistant to President Trump, Sebastian Gorka, for the latest on the former president's condition. And the senior Conservative MP, David Simmons, will be here in the studio. But before all of that, let's get the very latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Tom, thank you. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just gone 10 o'clock. Your top story this morning. Donald Trump has been shot during an attempted assassination at a rally in Pennsylvania. The former US president has now returned to his home in New Jersey after he was injured. Trump says he was shot in the ear, describing a whizzing sound and feeling a bullet ripping through skin. Video footage shows the moment shots rang out, sparking panic in the crowd as Secret Service agents swarmed the former president.
If you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
One rally attendee was killed and another 2 injured. The suspected shooter is also said to have been killed. The FBI has now confirmed the name of the alleged gunman as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks. President Joe Biden has responded to the assassination attempt. Speaking last night in Delaware, Biden condemned the attack against his political opponent.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. But the bottom line is that the Trump rally was a rally that he should have been able to be conducted peacefully without any problem. But the idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of. It's just not appropriate. Everybody must condemn it.
Meanwhile, world leaders have reacted to the shooting on social media, including the German Chancellor and the French President. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said he was appalled at the shooting at the campaign rally of the former US President. US Vice President Kamala Harris said, "We are all relieved that he is not seriously injured," while billionaire Elon Musk has thrown his support behind Trump, saying, "I fully endorse President Trump and hope for his rapid recovery." And Ivanka Trump also shared a message for her father, saying she's grateful to the Secret Service and is praying for the victims of the senseless violence.
And he seemed fine yesterday. That's one of the amazing points of this whole thing was, just how amazing President Trump was. I would hope and suggest that, they dial it down a little bit. Don't turn this into a political opportunity. I don't think they'll need to. Surely let's not dial up any kind of divisiveness or dial up the rhetoric. He doesn't have to. I mean, he's been very disciplined in this campaign so far, and you saw that in the debate, and you've seen it, typically in the way he campaigns. But, this is an opportunity, as odd as that is.
In other news, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has described Labour's work as urgent as he set out to include 35 new bills into the King's speech next week. The government says the new laws will hand greater powers to local leaders, with economic growth at the top of the agenda. The Prime Minister described the measures as the down payment on the change this government is seeking to deliver. And all eyes are on England tonight as they face Spain in the final of the European Championships in Berlin. Ahead of the big game, Sir Keir Starmer has praised England's footballers, saying they've made the country proud. In a letter to Gareth Southgate and the team, the Prime Minister emphasised their craft and hard work and wished them the very best. Gareth Southgate and his players are hoping to win England's first trophy since 1966 and go down in legend.
I'm not a believer in fairy tales, but I am a believer in dreams. And we've had big dreams. We've felt the need and the importance of that. But then, you have to make those things happen.
And Kensington Palace has confirmed that the Princess of Wales will attend the men's Wimbledon final today, while Prince William's in Berlin to watch England take on Spain in the Euro 2024 final. Princess Catherine will present either Novak Djokovic or Carlos Alcaraz with the trophy on centre court. It will be her second public appearance following her cancer diagnosis. She made a brief return to the public spotlight last month at Treeping the Colour. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. Today with me, Tom Harwood. Now, still lots more to come in the programme. In just a minute, I'll be speaking to the former Deputy Assistant to President Trump, Sebastian Gorka, for the very latest on the former president's condition. I'll also be joined by the senior Conservative Member of Parliament, David Simmons. Can the Tories turn around their fortunes in opposition? And later in the programme, I'll be joined by the former England footballer, Carlton Palmer. Is football finally coming home? And the Professor of Politics, Eric Kaufman, will share his new book, which looks at the roots of wokeness. Well, before all of that, let's get straight to it. I'm joined by the former Deputy Assistant to Donald Trump, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Sebastian, the world was shocked when it saw that footage last night, especially here in the United Kingdom. My goodness me. Just first of all, your reaction to this attempted assassination.
Sadly, as I said to a friend who texted me the word unbelievable moments after we saw the footage, I responded, not.
I believe we're having a bit of problem with the audio there with Sebastian Gorka. We'll try and fix that as soon as we can. But joining me now in the studio is the Conservative MP, David Simmons. David, it is an extraordinary time in politics. Before we get to the position of the Conservative Party, I'd just like a word on what has taken place in the United States of America.
Well, good morning, Tom. It's quite shocking to see what's happened. I think we've been very lucky, having just fought an election campaign here in the UK, that we've not seen the kind of incidents that we do see sometimes in American politics. But I think we all wish Donald Trump and the other people who come forward in that contest the very best, because making sure that the leader of the free world is somebody that we can work with is incredibly important. And we want to make sure that it's a contest that's fought in a peaceful way and that gives everybody a chance to have a fair say.
Has the leader of the opposition issued a statement?
I'm not aware that we've seen anything from there, but I know many Conservatives have come out and said, look, you know, we wish Donald Trump well. Clearly, we wish President Biden well as well. You know, the United States is a very important ally of the UK, and we need to make sure that we have that special relationship, regardless of who the politicians involved are.
Now, turning a little bit closer to home, the Conservative Party has its lowest number of MPs in history. There has never been a time when there have been fewer Conservative voices in Parliament. How on earth does the party build back from this historic low?
Well, firstly, we need to show the public that we can be an effective opposition, and the work started on that, making sure that things that the Labour Party put in their manifesto that we said we would oppose, that we're ready to do that work in opposition through the parliamentary processes. But also we need a bit of time to reflect. Now, we know that every successful Prime Minister, every successful Conservative leader has built their own electoral coalition. And Edward Heath's was different from Margaret Thatcher's, which was different from John Major's, from David Cameron's, from Boris Johnson's. So we need to make sure that as we reflect on that, we look at the details of who it was that we lost, who it was that might have supported us if we'd had the right ideas to put forward, and put that electoral coalition together so that we have both a package of policies and the right approach that makes us an electable party to form a government again at the next general election.
Now, there's a huge amount of consternation over not only what will happen in the leadership contest, but what the leadership contest will look like. Will it be under the same rules that have been operating since William Hague was leader of the opposition? Will party members get a say? And indeed, how long will this take? These are all live discussions within the Conservative Party right now.
So there isn't, as far as I can tell, is committed that that will happen, and that includes members of Parliament whittling down the candidates, and then the voters, the members of the party, having a chance to choose that person.
So you believe that the system, as has been in place since the turn of the century, will be the system this time round?
That is the process that we are planning to use, and we're all very committed to make sure that the volunteers who worked incredibly hard get a say in that process. We also need to make sure that whoever emerges from that as the leader and the policy platform that we have is one that will appeal to something like 14 million voters in the UK, as well as those who are members of the Conservative Party, because that's the sort of number that we need to connect with if we're going to make sure we can form a government at the next general election.
Is it, though? Because, of course, the Labour Party's just won an enormous majority on 34% of the vote.
Well, it's very clear that the big story of the last election was people staying at home. And we need to make sure that we energise people, that they can see there's a positive agenda that they want to come out and vote for. And that's why that policy platform is going to be so important. The other big factor is going to be the sense of the tone of the election, that we know there have been a lot of issues, a lot of division and disagreements within the Conservative Party in recent years. There's a real sense of unity amongst parliamentary colleagues at the moment, a desire to put all of that behind us and make sure that we've got a leader and a policy platform that we can unite around. We do need to take the time to make sure we get that right, that our volunteers and our members and people who support us from the business community, from the academic world, have the chance to critique some of those ideas so we can make sure that what emerges from that is a really strong offer to the voters.
So it sounds like you're favouring a much longer election process, a sort of diagnostic process as well as an election process, a big battle of ideas over the next 4 or 5 months?
There's going to be a process certainly running over a number of months, I think, towards the party conference being the conclusion of that in the autumn, because we need to make sure, for example, that we've got all the data about what happened in the election. There are many things that we simply don't know yet about who turned out to vote, where those people turned out to vote, what things there were that influenced people in the way they cast their ballots. And we need to make sure that we get the time to get those decisions right. And one of the risks is that we see a knee-jerk response that says, well, the issue is we need to be more like Reform or more like Labour or more like the Liberal Democrats. We need to win voters from all of those parties if we're going to form that successful electoral coalition.
And yet you mention these parties. The Liberal Democrats have more members of Parliament than at any point in that party's history. They've got over 70 MPs now. They rival the Conservatives in terms of size in Parliament. And also Reform, now 5 MPs, a real bridgehead, a real foothold in Parliament, and millions of votes, more votes than the Liberal Democrats in the country. Is there not a risk to the Conservative Party that if there's a very long leadership election, there's a vacuum in the opposition, and that vacuum is stepped into by Sir Ed Davey and Mr Nigel Farage?
Well, it's pretty clear Ed Davey doesn't really have very much useful to say on anything. And it's going to be a very strange Parliament because we know, as well as the Reform members of Parliament, you've got the Gaza candidates as well, who are going to be a big issue for the way that the Labour government conducts itself. But I think it is worth taking the time to get this right. We know that we're in for a period of opposition. The Labour Party has a very big majority. There are things that we promised our voters that we would oppose, and we need to make sure that we do that. And I know that Rishi Sunak is absolutely committed that he will lead that opposition effectively in the time that he remains as the leader. And that gives the rest of the party, the volunteers, our supporters in the wider country, the opportunity to make sure that we do properly learn the lessons of what happened a few weeks ago, and that we come out of that strong and ready to fight the next election as an effective, credible governing party.
Do you believe that Rishi Sunak would be willing, therefore, to serve as leader of the opposition for many more months to come, having humiliating exchanges over the dispatch boxes at Prime Minister's Questions with the new Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer? A lot of people are very sceptical that Rishi Sunak would want to stand there as the sort of leader of a defeated party, week after week after week, still standing at that dispatch box, still asking those questions.
Well, public service isn't easy, and tough decisions are not just things for government. We have to take them in opposition as well. But Rishi has been very clear that he will serve in that capacity to make sure the party has the time and the space that it needs to make the right decision about his successor, and that we have that effective opposition laid out in the next few months. And given that we're likely to make a decision around about the time of party conference, maybe just after, in the early autumn, it means that we go into the new legislative period of the forthcoming Parliament, the debates that will follow about the legislation outlined in this week's King's speech, as a party that is absolutely fit to oppose, but also to begin to set out what our alternative legislative agenda would be, because we want to make sure that the voters can see what the choice is before them.
Now, just finally, there are some names that have been floating around, none of them officially declared yet, of course, but Kemi Badenoch, Robert Jenrick, Suella Braverman, Tom Tugendhat, James Cleverly. Are you leaning towards any of them?
Well, the party is full of talent. I think amongst those names, there are people like Tom, whose politics are very much politics that I find a great affinity with. We need to give them the opportunity to show to our volunteers, to our party members, to members of Parliament and to the wider public that they've got the ability not just to develop good policies, but to communicate those effectively in a way that the voters will warm to. So I think this is an opportunity for all of them to do that, and all of us, regardless of the outcome, to get behind the leader that emerges.
Keeping your cards close to your chest. David Simmons, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Really, really appreciate it. Well, coming up, we're going to be speaking to Nigel Farage, I'm being told. We'll see if we can get Sebastian Gorka back as well. It's going to be a corker of a show. Do not go anywhere.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Welcome back. Stefan Kyriazis has, as ever, been to the theatre and saw one of the most successful performers of the modern age, one who has made his name in different genres on television and is always a magnetic presence on the stage. About whom are we talking, Stefan?
We're talking about James Corden at the Old Vic for the Constituent, and it's traverse staging. So audience on either side, and it's a fantastic experience. But also it's been done this time to bring everything in a lot and make it quite intimate, because you just have one simple set. It's just a table, office space. This is a new play by Joe Penhall, and it's addressing very, very current issues of safety, especially for people in public service, doctors, nurses, teachers, and of course, as you know, politicians that are at risk and being attacked. So we have Joe Cox, Sir David Amess, and we have politicians talking about cancelling their surgeries, not wanting to appear in public, teachers being threatened. And James Corden plays an ex-serviceman who is going through a difficult divorce, dealing with a lot of PTSD, also feeling very much like fathers are overlooked, and he wants to fight for their rights. And an old school friend is a local MP, played by Anna Maxwell Martin. And he goes in to start talking to her, and it starts off quite chummy and jovial, and then it darkens and darkens. He gets quite aggressive and frustrated. She wants to help. She's an absolute idealist. This politician's sense of we don't choose who we work for. You know, we are here by duty to work for everybody in our constituency. It spirals a lot. I have to say, Corden, sensational. Really? He really is a fantastic actor. Of all of them, he's so natural. And he has the most difficult role where his character is shifting all the time and becomes potentially quite threatening and dangerous. But then there's also a beautiful catharsis at the end.
The People's Channel. Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show with me, Tom Harwood. It's 18 minutes past 10. Now, delighted to be rejoined by the former Deputy Assistant to Donald Trump, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Sebastian, I apologise for the connection issue we had a little bit earlier, but your reaction to the extraordinary news we heard overnight?
Well, my radio producer, within minutes of us seeing that shocking footage, texted me and said one word: unbelievable. I responded back immediately, no, absolutely expected. Why? Because for the last 8 years, they have demonized my former boss, the current leader of the opposition. They've called him a bigot, a racist, a white supremacist, and even a Nazi. They've normalized violence. We've had the senior senator for the Democrats threaten President Trump's nominees to the Supreme Court from the steps of the Supreme Court, say you will reap the whirlwind. We've had Democrat members of Congress like Maxine Waters say the following in public: if you see a member of the Trump cabinet in public, you surround them and then you harass them. The next thing
we're just trying to establish the connection with a broken line to Washington, D.C. We're going to see if we can to Sebastian Gorka, the Deputy Assistant to Donald Trump when he was President of the United States in the White House. Of course, a lot of shock in the United States. I believe that we've got Sebastian Gorka back with us. Apologies for the connection issues we're having today. Sebastian, you were saying that the rhetoric is partly to blame here.
Absolutely, absolutely. When you have your viewers fact check me, how about this example? The current Vice President, Kamala Harris, raised funds to bail out arsonists of Black Lives Matter. So those who were perpetrating violence in America were assisted by the current Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. So there's one party in America that has normalized violence, and it's not the Republicans, it's not the Conservatives, it's the Democrat Party. What we witnessed yesterday was the bitter fruit of the left saying President Trump is a threat to America, a threat to democracy. We now know who the threat to the Republic is, and it is the Democrat Party. I want
Is this
everyone
not
in the UK...
a troubling line to take, Dr. Gorka? Because
it's a statement. It's a statement of empirical
the Democrats,
fact.
of course, point to a speech that Donald Trump made on January the 6th, 2021, where he encouraged people to protest. Now, Donald Trump says he did not want people to do anything violently at all. But the Democrats say, look at the words that he used. Clearly, this encouraged violence. Now, if you're going to say that Donald Trump's words on January the 6th didn't encourage violence, surely you're going to have to take the same opinion when it comes to the Democrats now.
It's utterly outrageous. I was in the front row in front of President Trump on January 6th. What did he say? He said, we will now march peacefully and patriotically to Congress to have our voices be heard. How is that an incitement to violence, Tom?
I don't think it is. I don't think that you can say that that statement is an incitement to violence, and I think that there are many respectable Republican commentators who say that there was political rhetoric used by Donald Trump there that you can't say was an incitement to violence. Right? But if you accept
how can you say marching peacefully and patriotically? What is that an incitement to? It's an incitement to let your voice be heard.
I agree with you. And if you say that those words that Donald Trump used on that day were not an incitement to violence, of course, the Democrats say they were. It seems that we are now in a mirrored situation whereby people are pointing to political rhetoric that Democrats have used, saying that that is incitement.
It means one thing. It means one side is lying and the other side isn't. I mean, this is stunning. The man was shot at, almost murdered, and now they're trying to blame him? I mean, this is gaslighting beyond anything we have ever seen. We had BLM, Black Lives Matter, cause $3 billion worth of damage to America. More than 30 people were murdered by BLM, mostly blacks, by the way. And then who's responsible for the normalization of violence? The man who said, within 30 feet of me on January the 6th, in your lips, outside the White House, we will march peacefully and patriotically. You mustn't support the propagandists, Tom. That's outrageous.
Is it not possible that neither the Republicans nor the Democrats are to blame here, that presidents, sadly, have always faced these sorts of threats, whether it was Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, JFK or Ronald Reagan, all were shot at?
5 days ago, the current incumbent, Joe Biden, at a fundraiser said the following words: we must put Donald Trump in the bullseye. The bullseye. So I ask you, who's inciting violence, Tom?
I say that's political rhetoric. And if you're going to say that that sort of political rhetoric should never be said, I'm sure I could find you 100 times that Donald Trump has also used political rhetoric. My position is surely it is fine to use political rhetoric on either side, and that you are being slightly disingenuous where you defend all the rhetoric that Donald Trump has used that other people often say is incitement, and you're saying that rhetoric that is used by Democrats is always incitement. That seems inconsistent.
Let's cut to the chase here, okay? You're acting like a propagandist for the Democrats. Right now, live on TV, find me one instance where President Trump has used language like bullseye to talk about Biden. I'll wait.
Yeah, I don't. As you know, I don't have anything like that in front of me. But I do know that But I do know that there have been many examples of things that the former president have said that have been ripped from context. You've seen these, I've seen these. Social media, you can take in 2-hour-long speeches out of snippet and make people think one thing or another. And I wonder that trying to make this a partisan issue when we don't even know the motive of the shooter at this stage is perhaps premature.
Well, I can just go from facts. I'm sorry. I spent 30 years in national security. I was strategist to the president in the White House on national security issues. I'm a data-driven individual. One party supports Antifa. One party supports BLM. One party has leading lights use actually inflammatory language, and
We're
it's
going to have
not
to
our
leave it there.
party.
Sebastian Gorka, really appreciate your time and your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break, but up next we're going to be joined by Nigel Farage and a former England footballer.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. It is a bit of a mixed picture out there for the second half of the weekend. Actually a decent number of sunny spells to kick off the day across southern areas of England and Wales. A bright start for Northern Ireland, central western areas of Scotland as well. But this central slice really is seeing quite a lot of clouds, southeastern Scotland into northern England. Some drizzly outbreaks of rain to contend with. It's going to be quite damp and dull underneath here, unfortunately, and feeling cool with only 15 to 17 degrees Celsius. For central Scotland into southern England and Wales, though, 20 to 23 degrees Celsius, a bit more pleasant. As we head towards the big Euros grand final game, then there is still going to be some cloud lingering across coasts of north-east Scotland as that breeze pushes it in from the North Sea. Inland areas, though, faring quite well with some sunny spells, a few sharp showers to watch out for. The rain across this central area should begin to ease, and hopefully it will turn drier as we head towards kick-off. And southern areas of England and Wales not faring too badly at all with some late sunny spells as the game does eventually begin. Overall, then, it will be a dry evening, and particularly into the overnight period. Most places should be relatively okay with some clear spells in there. A few isolated mist and fog patches to watch out for. Temperatures holding up reasonably well, around 11-12 degrees Celsius for most of our towns and cities. But I'm sure some of you have already spotted this in the far southwest. This is our next area of low pressure that is going to start moving its way in for the new working week, staying unsettled really as we head over the next few days. This will be bringing some outbreaks of rain and showers in there. These are looking like they could be heavy in places with some thunder and even hail in the mixture as well. The northern half of the UK should start off reasonably well though with some sunny spells, but then we'll start to see a few showers developing here into the afternoon as well. Some of those again could be on the sharp side. Temperatures, though, for all of us now beginning to climb a bit closer towards average for the time of year, 19 to 22 degrees Celsius. Unfortunately, it will remain unsettled throughout the middle part of the week, though, with further areas of low pressure arriving. Bye-bye.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Meghan Markle has reportedly finished filming her new show for Netflix. It aims to celebrate the joys of cooking, gardening, entertaining and friendship.
Yeah, this comes after Prince Harry's Netflix documentary, The Heart of Invictus, failed to hit the right note with viewers missing out on the top 10 in the streaming charts.
So, will this next venture be a success? Well, joining us now is royal commentator Kinsey Schofield.
I know I've talked to the both of you about Meghan Markle potentially running for president, so this feels like a bit of a dud to go from Meghan Markle running for president to Meghan Markle's Netflix series about friendship and cooking. So she's wrapped this recent show. They rented a home near hers in Montecito so that as their cooking set. And they're saying that this is really make or break for Harry and Meghan when it comes to their Netflix contract.
You think, Kinsey, it's fair to say that Meghan Markle has proved to be commercially a bit of a damp squib? Even in America, her native homeland, she's kind of Oprah without the audience when it comes to the cooking. Also, is she kind of, do you think... They saw her as the golden ticket, didn't they, to unlimited revenue, unlimited audiences, and it just hasn't happened.
Look, I think Meghan is a beautiful woman, and I do think she's talented, but I think how you treat people is incredibly important. And not only was she rumored to have been cruel inside Kensington Palace with several bullying allegations, but here in the States, Archwell Productions, their audio section, their scripted section, they've gone through several employees. And I think it's a reflection on the way that people are treated there. And I think as a viewer, you might get that. You might feel that way. And maybe that is where the appeal has been lost.
GB News, the People's Channel. Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Now, time for the best part of the show, our Greatest Britain, where we share amazing people who do amazing things. And this week, that is Dr. Leo Cheng and the Reverend Hilary Cheng.
Well, Dr. Chen regularly serves as a volunteer surgeon aboard the Mercy ships in West Africa and has recently served his 17th mission aboard the ships. He volunteers with his wife, Reverend Hilary Cheng, a Methodist minister in the UK.
Thank you for joining us, and what a privilege. So just briefly explain, what are Mercy ships?
Well, Mercy ships provide world-class surgery on the ship, and the ship then sail to these poorest of the poor country because there's no infrastructure to get road or rail there. And we offer free surgery and also education, training of medical staff, and partner with the local or the host nation to build up their surgical and anaesthetic services.
So how long have you been travelling West Africa? You go on all these different ships, different ports, and you treat the needy and the vulnerable. How long have you both been doing this?
20 years.
20 years?
Just over 20 years.
And you take the time to do this out of your own holiday from work. Why do you do it?
Well, because I'm indebted to the education in this country with all the qualification I get. And NHS is great. I love the NHS because without NHS, we see cases that we see in the low-income country. And I want to make use of my hand to help those people who have no way of helping themselves. Because the tumours, the deformities, not just a physical ailment, but it's being ostracised and die early, commit suicide because they've been ostracised by their family.
When you're on the ship, you are seeing the very worst that the country can offer. I find it a great privilege to work alongside these people.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News with me, Tom Harwood. The time is 35 minutes past 10. Now, for a slightly more intellectual foray into the culture wars, I'm delighted to be joined by Professor Eric Kaufman, who is the author of this new book. It's called Taboo, and How Making Race Sacred Produced a Cultural Revolution. Goodness me, it's a weighty topic to be talking about, Eric. What inspired you to write this?
Well, I mean, clearly the term, the discussions around the culture war and woke have really exploded, obviously, in the last sort of 5-10 years. I kind of felt that it was important, two things. First of all, to come in with a different explanation of why, where woke came from and its impact. And secondly, to sort of put through some policy solutions for how to deal with it. Because a lot of books talk about the problem, not many talk about how to deal with it. So I kind of wanted to put in a 12-point plan how politically we can start to actually push back on this.
Because it does seem that perhaps what was once called political correctness now often is called wokeism, what you have described in your English title of the book as taboo. I'm interested in the United States, you do have the word wokeness in the title. What was the difference between those two titles?
Well, the difference is that in the US, the publishers were after something different, and it's not so much the title as the subtitle of the American book, which is a 12-point plan for rolling back progressive extremism. That's clearly a more aggressive title. That's what they wanted.
Right.
But really, actually, if you think of the book and what it contains, a lot of it is really explaining the origins of woke. And central to that is this idea of the anti-racism taboo, which emerges in the mid-1960s in polite society in the U.S. That is like the big bang of our moral universe. Everything flows from it.
That's so interesting, because a lot of people would say that sort of a lot of the more peculiar aspects of politically correct culture are much more recent, have come about really since 2015, 2016, but you trace it way back further.
Yeah, I think this is a mistake people make, is to think that, oh, it's a new thing. What I'm arguing is this is a continuation. It's in the DNA of our left liberal moral order. If you were to be in a feminist reading group in the 1970s, or a race studies reading group, you would notice very little difference between the late 60s, early 70s, and today. It's just that this has spilled out into many new spheres. So because of social media, it's bled off campus, and it's now in, the New York Times and the Washington Post and the media, youth culture, all of these places, corporations, places where you wouldn't have seen it before. And so people think this is new. But actually, it's got a very long lineage going back to the late 60s.
Now, that is, to some extent, what the arguments of a guy called Richard Hanania has been writing about, the fact that that civil rights laws have forced people into slightly peculiar and contradictory positions when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so his argument is that culture is downstream of law. Yeah. I don't make that argument. I argue that it is culture. But unlike, say, Chris Rufo, who argues that this is about the Marxists who, they couldn't get the working class to revolt, so they turned to race, gender, sexual minorities to revolt. That's, I don't think, the main driver here. The main driver here, I think, is this idea of left liberalism, and that means equal outcomes by race and sex, so no race gaps, no gaps between men and women in the boardroom, admittance to Harvard. And then the other part is being super, super, super sensitive to these minority groups. And really, the minority groups are the key. So what woke means in a sentence for your viewers is woke is the making sacred of historically marginalized race, gender, and sexual identity groups. Starts with race, spreads to the feminists, spreads to gay, spreads to trans, etc. But that is the core of it.
But basically, your assessment isn't that this is some sort of sinister, deeply sort of Marxist plot or whatever. This is people being very nice and wanting to be seen to be very nice.
Right, and essentially going overboard, right? So these are good things. I mean, being nice or treating minorities well was good up until the point where it started to bleed into saying, if you say, anyone can make it in America, that's a racist microaggression. If you go hiking and everyone's white, that's racism. You see where it tips over. Yes, it's a good thing not to call somebody the N-word, but once you're tipping over and you're shutting down expressions of majority culture, masculine culture, on the basis of calling it racist and sexist, you're stifling and immiserizing the culture. So that's what I mean, is this sort of overshoot. But it's more like a mind virus than a plot. It's a bit like the Trump assassination. It's not a conspiracy. It's the mind virus that spreads into the assassin's head, right? But this has not got a leader and a plan.
Now, I think everyone watching would think it's a very good thing that no one, that it's considered deeply, deeply wrong to call someone the N-word. How do you account for some of the progress that has been made in these issues of racial equality, but then stop before the overshoot happens? How do you square that circle?
It's a tough balance, right? I mean, but this is what we need to be talking about, is optimizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, not maximizing. The regime we're in now is maximize. Any gap between men and women, between black and white in terms of engineers, or Harvard has to be 13% black because the population of the U.S. is 13% black. That's what I would call maximal, a maximal approach. An optimal approach is to say, you know, we want to make it as easy as possible. We want to make sure the pipeline is recruiting from as many places as possible, but we're not going to discriminate against Asians and whites to ensure that it's 13% black. So that's a subtle difference, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're in a place where people who just believe in equal outcomes and emotional harm protection, you can't offend a member of such a group, the most sensitive member of such a group, that philosophy is what's driving the system. So I want to see optimal, not maximal anti-racism. So for example, talking about structural racism is which is a pseudoscientific, non-evidence-based, almost a conspiracy theory. That's taken over from being anti-racist, right? So we're now talking about any disparity between, whether it's exclusion from the classroom, in jail, not getting into Harvard, equals racism. That's where we're at.
The only answer to some of these questions must be discrimination in society, that there can't be other answers as well. Eric, thank you so much for talking through what is a deeply thoughtful book. Really appreciate the discussion. Lots to think about there. Lots to think about.
Thanks, Tom.
Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by the leader of the Reform Party and friend of Donald Trump, Nigel Farage. Nigel, first of all, your reaction to the shocking news out of the United States?
Well, I was very upset when I heard the news last night, and having looked at the clips, he literally went like that. He literally moved his head sharply, as he does, and that's what saved his life, because if that bullet had been just a couple of inches to the other side, he would have been gone. Of course, one man is dead, 2 are critically injured. So, yes, upset, sadly, not shocked. I'm afraid the narrative that is put out there about Donald Trump is just so dangerous and so damaging. And look, you know, we've seen it in British politics. There are extremists, stroke terrorists on either end of the spectrum. But what we see through mainstream media and social media are millions of people turning towards hatred. And I have to tell you, Tom, we're not that far behind, I'm afraid, in this country too.
2 members of parliament in this country have been shot, killed, knifed in the last 8 years. You yourself have been the victim of projectiles being thrown at you, drinks being thrown at you. How worried are you for your own safety in the light of this?
So the last time someone threw a drink at me was last Wednesday. I generally don't publicise it when these things happen. Sometimes you see it on, you know, full view with something chucked in my face or cement thrown at me or whatever it is. Normally, Tom, when it happens, I just don't talk about it. But okay, now I will. I mean, it's amazing that when in the European elections of 2019, someone threw a milkshake straight in my face. Joe Brand, the comedian, said on a BBC comedy programme, why waste your time with that? Better to use battery acid. And she's still appearing on the BBC. We've had David Aronovich, the left-wing journalist, writes for The Times, does a BBC Radio 4 programme, said about 5 weeks ago that the best thing the Democrats could do is have Trump shot. And he's still working for The Times. He's still working for the BBC. But I'm sorry, but there is too much of this. It's kind of acceptable to say violent, horrible things about right-wing people, but if I said something about somebody in the Labour Party, anywhere near that, I mean, I'd be out of the House of Commons within 24 hours. So we need to have a proper rethink. Yes, there are bad things said on both sides, but I do believe that the role of mainstream media has a lot to do with this.
That is really shocking that just on Wednesday there was another attack. I assume that you're pressing charges. What more can you tell us about that?
This happened, on Wednesday. You know, it was a pint of beer. I always press charges. If I can, I always press charges. But you see, it's perfectly acceptable because it's funny. If I'm attacked, it's funny. It's an object of a joke. And it can be on a major BBC programme and no one cares. And I'm sorry, but this is all too much one way. And we see it through media, through social media. We see it. I mean, I was very shocked, actually, what teenagers were telling me in Clacton during the campaign. You know, 16, 17, 18-year-olds coming up wanting pictures, wanting to chat, interested in politics and the world, and then telling me what their teachers were saying about me. Of course, we want robust, healthy debate. We've always wanted that. And, I grew up in a world where left and right-wing politicians argued furiously, but they could go for a beer afterwards. But it's somehow the new left liberal elite have this sort of form of intellectual superiority where they believe they're better human beings than those on the centre right. And that is what's run through media, education, and that is at the heart of this problem, liberal intolerance.
Now, of course, it was just over a week ago that Donald Trump was congratulating you on your election as a Member of Parliament. I know there's a time difference. Of course, Donald Trump will be asleep at this moment in time. But have you been in touch with his team? Will you be speaking with Donald Trump in the coming days?
Well, I had a good chat with him during the week. And I did say to him, if I hadn't been elected to Parliament, I'd be with him this weekend. So I would have been at that rally if I decided not to stand for Parliament. But I've now decided, Tom, in the light of what's happened, that I will fly out to America this week. I will go and see my friend, and I'll do it. I'll listen to his acceptance speech at the convention on Thursday, and I'll do it not just as a friend, but I'll do it because we have to stand up for democracy. We have to stand up for people to be able to campaign. If we don't, we're absolutely sunk.
That's a powerful symbol. I'm sure many people will remember when Tony Blair, dropped things, flew out to the United States after the 11th of September 2001. It was seen to be a huge moment of unity between our countries. I suppose at moments like this, it does feel like there is something profound going on, and that sort of gesture of unity, I'm sure, will be hugely, hugely appreciated. Nigel Farage, thank you so much for joining us here on the Camilla Tominey programme. Really, really appreciate your time. Goodness me, weighty, weighty topics to be discussing. And we haven't even got to the football yet. Yes, former England footballer Carlton Palmer will be coming onto the show next. Will football come home tonight?
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Meghan Markle has reportedly finished filming her new show for Netflix. It aims to celebrate the joys of cooking, gardening, entertaining and friendship.
Yeah, this comes after Prince Harry's Netflix documentary, The Heart of Invictus, failed to hit the right note with viewers, missing out on the top 10 in the streaming charts.
So, will this next venture be a success? Well, joining us now is royal commentator Kinsey Schofield.
I know I've talked to the both of you about Meghan Markle potentially running for president, so this feels like a bit of a dud to go from Meghan Markle running for president to Meghan Markle's Netflix series about friendship and cooking. So she's wrapped this recent show. They rented a home near hers in Montecito, so that as their cooking set. And they're saying that this is really make or break for Harry and Meghan when it comes to their Netflix contract.
Do you think, Kinsey, it's fair to say that Meghan Markle has proved to be commercially a bit of a damp squib? Even in America, her native homeland, she's kind of Oprah without the audience when it comes to the cooking. Also, is she kind of, do you think... They saw her as the golden ticket, didn't they, to unlimited revenue, unlimited audiences, and it just hasn't happened.
Look, I think Meghan is a beautiful woman, and I do think she's talented, but I think how you treat people is incredibly important. And not only was she rumored to have been cruel inside Kensington Palace with several bullying allegations, but here in the States, Archwell Productions, their audio section, their scripted section, they've gone through several employees. And I think it's a reflection on the way that people are treated there. And I think as a viewer, you might get that. You might feel that way, and maybe that is where the appeal has been lost.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show with me, Tom Harwood. It's just gone 10 minutes to 11 on GB News. Now, I'm delighted to be joined by the former England footballer Carlton Palmer because, Carlton, this is a huge, huge game for the England team this evening. The first Euros final that England have ever played abroad.
Yeah, it's massive. I'm actually in Spain as it happens, which is coincidental. But yeah, it's a massive game for England tonight. Tough game against probably the best team in the tournament thus far. But I really believe that we could win the game tonight. I think it's going to be tough, and I think it's just going to be, Gareth's going to work out. I mean, they've had an extra day's rest, which will be a big factor, I think, tonight. So it's one of those games. I think England have got to stay in the game to win the game. The longer the game goes, the better the chances for England, I think.
Now, you were, of course, part of the team at Euro 92 when England's top striker, then Gary Lineker, was substituted by Graham Taylor against Sweden. And, of course, things didn't go particularly well for the team. Can you see any parallels between that moment and today?
Oh, I think for sure. I think, like I've said, the game for England to win, it's got to go long. And I think Ollie Watkins has got a big part to play in this game at some point. And I think possibly, depending how Gareth sees it, Harry Kane has been well reported that he's not 100%. He missed, 6 games at the end of the Bundesliga. I think maybe on 60 or 70 minutes we might see Ollie Watkins coming on. But not a parallel, Gary Lineker was coming to the end of his England career and the end of his career. Harry Kane's got plenty more years to come. And this is a great opportunity for England to win a major trophy on foreign soil.
Harry Kane does have many more years to come. However, he's not the youngest member of the team. He's been criticised for being a bit slow, a bit stationary. But could Gareth Southgate be fearful of dropping Harry Kane and fearful of suffering some kind of backlash?
Well, he's not going to drop him. He's 100% going to start tonight. He's not going to drop him. Like I've said, it's been well documented that he's not been 100% fit, but he's a very important part of Gareth Southgate's team. He has scored 3 goals. He is in contention to get the Golden Boot, and I'm sure he'd like to lift the trophy and get the Golden Boot. So there's no question.
Carlton, we have very limited time, so I'm just going to interrupt. Finally, do you think it's coming home?
Yes, I think we'll win. I think we win. I think extra time and penalties will win.
Ooh, penalties. That will be a nail-biter. Let's hope that penalties go a little bit better for us than they have done in previous tournaments. But thank you so much to all of my guests and Carlton Palmer there at the end. Camilla is, of course, back next week. But up next, it's the one and only Michael Portillo.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. It is a bit of a mixed picture out there for the second half of the weekend. Actually, a decent number of sunny spells to kick off the day across southern areas of England and Wales. A bright start for Northern Ireland, central western areas of Scotland as well. But this central slice really is seeing quite a lot of clouds, southeastern Scotland into northern England. Some drizzly outbreaks of rain to contend with. It's going to be quite damp and dull underneath here, unfortunately, and feeling cool with only 15 to 17 degrees Celsius. For central Scotland into southern England and Wales, though, 20 to 23 degrees Celsius, a bit more pleasant. As we head towards the big Euros grand final game, then there is still going to be some cloud lingering across coasts of north-east Scotland as that breeze pushes it in from the North Sea. Inland areas, though, faring quite well with some sunny spells, a few sharp showers to watch out for. The rain across this central area should begin to ease, and hopefully it will turn drier as we head towards kick-off, and southern areas of England and Wales not faring too badly at all with some late sunny spells as the game does eventually begin. Overall, then, it will be a dry evening, and particularly into the overnight period. Most places should be relatively okay with some clear spells in there. A few isolated mist and fog patches to watch out for. Temperatures holding up reasonably well, around 11-12 degrees Celsius for most of our towns and cities. But I'm sure some of you have already spotted this in the far southwest. This is our next area of low pressure that is going to start moving its way in for the new working week, staying unsettled really as we head over the next few days. This will be bringing some outbreaks of rain and showers in there. These are looking like they could be heavy in places with some thunder and even hail in the mixture as well. The northern half of the UK should start off reasonably well though with some sunny spells, but then we'll start to see a few showers developing here into the afternoon as well. Some of those again could be on the sharp side. Temperatures, though, for all of us now beginning to climb a bit closer towards average for the time of year, 19 to 22 degrees Celsius. Unfortunately, it will remain unsettled throughout the middle part of the week, though, with further areas of low pressure arriving. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
I can't believe this.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh, you shocked me. I never won a penny in my life.
If I was there, I'd buy you a drink.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Hey!